Welcome to Subramani. I'm going to talk to you about the things that I've learned in investing over a long period of time, and it will be in 4 or 5 parts. So, the first part I'm going to talk to you about is the risk of using models. Well, I don't mean the two-legged variety, I mean the Excel models, which many of us have started our lives using them, and they are of course very useful because the human mind is not complex enough to consider all the complexities that are needed while doing a forecast of a company's future. But there is a risk that in while modeling you get carried away by the model that you're using, that you miss the mega trends. So let me just explain. So I used to use models for doing projections for hotels in, say, all over the country, but largely say in Goa. That is the one which I have done the maximum, and we make a lot of assumptions, including the dollar rate. The dollar in those days used to appreciate by at least 8 9% every year, because that was the gap between Indian inflation and American inflation. But that's a formula that you use, and it worked. And suppose the dollar appreciated by 12% every year over the last 5 years. The assumption is it will do that over the next 5, 10, 20, 25 years. That is what we call recency bias or whatever. But I did not know any of these words in the late 1980s and 1990s. So we used to use that. So maybe by my standards, I would have said by now the dollar would be something like 108 rupees or 110 rupees or something like that, and I would have made the assumptions and created the projections and given it to a lender, who would have very happily lent, saying, "Oh, this is a very good projection," and things like that. So in my model, there is only one thing which went wrong: the dollar rate, and that is so bad that the whole projection would have looked like absolute ridiculous piece of trash. The US dollar is today below 80, and according to my calculations, it would have gone much higher, because it is simply assumed that 10% year on year will happen. Like how people who give houses on rent assume that 10% increase in rents will happen. It has not happened over the last 5 years, right? So don't use models too much, because using models is very useful at the lower level, at a junior level, because at the senior level you don't even think that you can replace the human mind by putting everything into a model and saying, "Oh, I've done the back testing and it works." So if you think that you can use a laptop or a computer and a software and completely replace the human mind, that can work, yes, at the lower end, but not at the higher end, because I completely missed the mega trend that the dollar might appreciate at 2% or 3% or 4%, and that one assumption made the whole model wrong. Modeling has another problem, that modeling is very useful when you're dealing with a company like, say, Ultratech or Prism Johnson, where you know that there is only one product which the company makes. So this is the input cost, this is the volume, and this is the price. So once somebody gives you some of these numbers, you can fill in and arrive at the next quarter EPS. But as companies gets more complicated, or the story completely changes. For example, Apollo Hospital used to be a dividend yield share, and then it was available at 9 rupees, then it went to 135. The dividend yield story was over. After that, it became like a typical hospital kind of a thing, and we didn't know how to use, what kind of discounting to use. So again, the model was right, maybe even the earnings was right, but we were not sure about the quality of management. Then we were not sure about whether the whether the flower shop and the book shop will be integrated into the main company, whether it will be kept separate. None of this we knew. So the model may have worked, but the PE which we were willing to give it, or the PE which we were willing to attribute to it, was completely wrong. So there, when the perception changes, Lupin Laboratories, I think it was not a very great reputation, so it nosedived 700 to 70, 70 back to 700. This happened, right? So your model would have worked, you would have got the EPS right, but you would have got the PE completely wrong. So Models are useful. Models are very useful for predicting a very short-termish kind of a thing. Next 2 quarters, how will cement prices behave? If you don't know that, even that model won't work. But another problem with modeling is you tend to over worry, like using Graham's numbers today. You have to read Graham and understand what he said rather than try to copy and say, oh, the PE should be so much, bonds will always be valued higher than equity, right? So that time there was not so much on growth, it was more on value investing and there was less on growth. So today, using the Graham model seems to be very difficult for evaluating companies like a Zomato or even a Google or an Amazon 10 years back or 15 years back, right? Or a Tesla. It's almost impossible to use some of those models. So your models have to evolve or your models will over specify, right? For example, if I'm making a bridge which should take a 6-ton vehicle or maybe even a 10-ton vehicle, I may overemphasize and make it for a 200-ton vehicle, which is completely over engineering and a waste of time and effort and resources. Much better to create a bridge which should take a 10-ton, 12-ton vehicle and control the traffic and make sure that the new 25-ton trucks come, divert them to a different bridge. That is the other possibility, that you don't overuse this bridge. So another important thing to understand is most of the truck drivers do not understand that below a particular height is the only truck which is allowed. So if you tell them that your truck is too tall, a very good chance that they will not even listen to you because they don't understand the model. So what you have to do, you have seen this in Bombay. In some places they put something hanging on top so that if your truck hits that board or if your bus hits that board, it means you cannot pass under the bridge. There is a bridge there, so if your vehicle has to pass, they have to put. So you have to understand that is very important. So the truck driver, which in this case is the investor, has to understand how to use the model. For example, the life insurance business has one amazingly stupid thing called policy illustration. A policy illustration, many people think, is an investment illustration to tell you how much returns you will get. It is not true. It is a cost indicator. It tells you that if the company were to get 6% return, how much your money will be. It is not a straight Excel sheet that you assume 6% and you say I'm putting 10,000 rupees, so 6% per annum. This is how much the amount will be. No, it is a cost illustrator. It tells you there will be so much of asset management costs, there will be so much of mortality charges. After deducting all this from that 6%, what is the return that is left with you? It does not say you will get at least 6%, it does not say you will get at least 10%. Nobody knows what rate you will get. So 2-3 things are important in the model. You should know when the model works. A model will work for Prism Johnson and over next 2 years or 3 years. It will not work in Reliance because the nature of income of Reliance is going to change substantially over the next few years. It will not be oil and gas which is driving it. It could be technology. It could be geo, it could be the usage of geo. The many things that they own could all come to pay the dividends, right? Retail could take off in a big way, or retail could flop, or they could enter into solar energy. We don't know. So a model will not work there. So it is important to know where the model will work, where it will not work. It will work for single product companies. It will work for the short run, I mean 2 years, 3 years. But if there is a mega trend happening, very likely that the model will miss it. I missed the model completely when I was making projections for hotels in Goa. Luckily, I'm not doing that anymore. So if I were still doing it and using the same model, it wouldn't have worked. The model which I used for Reliance maybe 5 years back will not work today. What I've used today will not work 5 years later. So models are useful, but to be totally dependent on models or to think that because I've made a substantially great model, it has worked very well for me for the last 5 years or 7 years, I have to just copy it, give it to a software guy and he will make it even better, is wrong. Models don't always work that well. Thank you.